Hello, so slightly different location today. This is actually going to be my new flat, or at least part of it. Um, just try and balance out the screen here. Okay, so what I want to talk about is the nature of being assertive versus being easily offended or too sensitive. This, of course, comes down to the very nature of human communication and how people interrelate with each other. It's something we can all relate to because we all, unless you're a hermit living in a wilderness, um, we can all relate to it. We all have connection with other human beings in some format. In society, we have no other choice. Now, obviously, there's different societies around the world, and there's different social norms in different cultures. But even among different cultures, there are certain standards that can be seen as almost universal. Every human being responds with anger, with happiness, with sadness. These are basic human emotions that transcend culture. Um, and the thing I want to focus on, there's obviously a lot of angles to look at with this, but the thing I want to focus on is how we know when to be assertive versus, when we know when to stand up for ourselves and when we should sort of let something pass. Now, I'm sure everyone knows someone or has seen someone who is a very sensitive sort of person where they take every sort of dialogue as a personal insult or a personal challenge. And this is generally seen as a negative personality trait. It's seen as being quite weak. It's seen as being as making things difficult for other people because then other people feel like they're, to use a British expression, walking on eggshells. And of course, some other people won't care. They'll say, you know, I'm not going to sort of go out of my way to be sensitive with this person. It is their problem. Um, so such people, I find, give themselves a difficult path in life by being too sensitive and taking everything as an insult. That then leads on to how we need to be assertive. The fact of the matter is, this is not a fair world, and there are some times in life where most people, unless you are royalty or unless you are in a society where there's a certain personality cult and you literally are treated like a living god, most people at some point in their life will feel that they have suffered some sort of personal injustice. Now, this obviously varies hugely. Being shortchanged in a shop is hardly comparable to being part of a persecuted minority group, suffering severe discrimination or human rights abuses. So obviously there's big variations within this. But everyone at some point in their life will feel that they have in some way been treated unfairly or being humiliated or being treated disrespectfully for no good reason. I certainly have experienced that. I've felt like an outsider at times. I have felt that certain people have felt they could walk over me. And this is not exceptional, it's not unusual. I think most people can relate to this in some context or another. But the question is, how do we respond to it? I'm of the view that how we communicate depends on context. Some people take the view that they have this standard, consistent approach to everyone in every context. I don't quite go along those lines because different contexts, in my opinion, do require different approaches. But by the same token, some people always want to avoid confrontation at the price of never speaking up for what they believe in. And this might sound like I'm going into another realm of when is it appropriate to talk with conviction, but I think this also lends itself into being assertive. For me, it is like a lot of things, it is about getting a balance. I feel that if there are things that annoy us and someone has said something that kind of gets a little bit under our skin, the important thing is to ask the question in ourselves, well, is this person really trying to wind us up, or is it an honest mistake? More often than not, it is the latter. Now, it's something I could definitely relate to. There are some things that do irritate me that people say. and I feel frustrated by it because it's coming from a point of view of ignorance. And when they've said those things to me, it hasn't been in a hostile way. In fact, quite the opposite. But nevertheless, it is ignorance. So basically, what I'm talking about is, and this is a very personal matter, so people can judge us as much as they want. But I'm saying this just to provide an example. I'm from Northern Ireland, and within Great Britain, England, Scotland, and Wales, there is a huge amount of ignorance, quite frankly, that Northern Ireland is actually another home nation. It's part of the United Kingdom. So very often I've been in a situation where people say, "Where are you from?" I say Northern Ireland originally, and they say, "Oh, I was in Ireland once." Now I'm sure other people from Ulster can relate to this. It is very irritating because it's kind of talking to you like you're from a different place as opposed to being from part of the United Kingdom. And I really, really don't want to open up a whole vacuum with the debate about Irish politics. That's not the purpose of this. It's just that I'm a British citizen and I feel British. I am British. So when people use that sort of dialogue, like, "Oh, I was there once," and figure what, in your own country, in another part of the United Kingdom, and they can't seem to grasp that Northern Ireland and Ireland is not the same concept. It's just not. Of course, it's part of the island of Ireland, but it is. Um, so yeah, I think a lot of people have ignorance in that. But and this is why I'm using it as an example. If I went around and every single person that said that, which is a lot of people, and I was to get all personally offended and say, "Oh, I'm British. Why are you saying I'm not blah blah blah?" If I got really defensive and really overly sensitive, they would think that I'm too serious. I'm taking it too seriously, and I would be pigeonholed because this has happened on occasion as being a really hard-line unionist type, which I'm actually not. It's just a question of how I feel in my own identity. Um, I have a huge amount of respect for Irish culture, for Celtic culture, and so on, but I am British. So I'm just using that as an example. I'm sure most people, if really pushed, there will be some things that get on their nerves and some things that others say. There will be people who are really, really, really cool minded and they say, "Oh, nothing annoys me." I don't believe that because I believe most people, when push comes to shove, there will be something that I don't want to say triggers because that now has a different context. But triggers their emotions in the sense that they get defensive. Most people, if you really, really push them on it, will find something irritating. Most people will. So the question is, do we try to educate people in a non-patronizing way? Do we just what I tend to do in that situation that I just mentioned is I just kind of sometimes I can't be bothered to say anything, and sometimes I will politely say, "Well, actually, it's the UK. I'm not from Ireland per se." So sometimes I feel I need to correct them. What does irritate me though is when you tell someone something and you've already explained, clarified it, and they persist in saying the same thing. To me, that's going from a point of ignorance to a point of just being disrespectful. When they know that you feel a certain way about something, and the thing is, I don't like political correctness, and that ties into this oversensitivity thing, of course. But by the same token, although I'm hostile to the idea of political correctness and that we all have to self-censor, I don't believe in that. But I do believe that if we know something bothers someone, there is no point in saying it or saying the thing that irritates them just to there is no need to say it. Um, if someone feels a certain way about something, why bother them with it? It may be that we think they're being too sensitive, and that might well be the case. But by the same token, it's not a necessity to. I mean, I'll give another example just to highlight what I'm talking about. Transgender people, obviously, pronouns is a very important thing for them. Now, I happen to believe my own personal conviction is that simply taking off your penis does not make you a woman. Um, However, if I met a trans woman, I know that she would prefer that pronoun. So I'm not going to say, "Oh, by the way, I think you're a bloke." Because how would that benefit me? It wouldn't. I mean, in my mind, that's what I believe, but I'm not going to be disrespectful to them because they haven't done me any harm. You know, why try to get under the skin by saying something that would bother them? There's no point. So, in terms of sensitivity, I do think that people who are overly sensitive all the time, I don't think the world should pander to them. And I don't think that people should constantly have to walk on eggshells with them. That is their problem. And it comes down to a utilitarian question of should the whole world change for one person? So if you do get someone who's overly sensitive, and I'm not talking about someone who has serious mental health problems, and that is what's causing their sensitivity. I'm talking about people who are just have the princess or the prince syndrome. They feel that people need to, they feel that they're somehow a VIP and they're not. That's different from someone who has serious mental health problems, which is causing that condition, and that's beyond their control because it is a mental health problem, but it needs to be diagnosed. But sensitivity is an interesting thing. Then we get on to issues of national sensitivity, and I made a video similar to, well, covering that subject, where you get certain countries that are much more sensitive about national image than others. And there's certain parts of the world where certain cultural things that are culturally accept. I'll give an example. Apparently in Kyrgyzstan, there's a certain type of cuisine, which is, I think it's Kyrgyzstan, horse's penis. Yeah, I mean, the rest of us, that's funny, but apparently they get really sensitive if you laugh about that. In Thailand, they're really sensitive about the monarchy. And there's many other examples around the world. In America, arguably, racial issues are very sensitive. So then it comes down to the person, the sovereign individual. Obviously, with cultural issues, there's practical issues involved if you go into a certain country and you know they've got strict laws on issues to do with sensitivity, then you have to be careful in that regard. But in terms of personal situations within a society, I feel it is essential to be assertive. Otherwise, people will walk over you in life. Unfortunately, not everyone is a decent person. And there are some people who, given half a chance, will walk over others. And they will take advantage of people and they will try and it's not always a case of clear cut bullying, although that certainly happens. Sometimes it's a case of taking advantages. And it isn't always vulnerable people. We're not always talking about people with serious mental health problems. Sometimes it's people who don't have those problems, but they're just not necessarily assertive enough. That's why I think it is essential to be assertive now. A lot of people understandably don't like confrontation. Some people are very good at handling confrontation. You know, they really stand up for themselves and they will get into a shouting match with a stranger. Not everyone finds that easy. I'm somewhere in the middle myself. Some people will avoid confrontation at the price of personal insult or kind of they will avoid confrontation because they see that as the bigger problem of confrontation than feeling like they're being walked over. So they almost choose the feeling of being walked over as the lesser evil than the tension and the stress and the intimidation sometimes from confrontation. So being assertive to me is not necessarily about always getting into arguments and standing for yourself in that way, but knowing how to say something at the right time. And it does take some practice, it really does. This is not an easy thing. For some people, it comes very naturally, but I would say the majority of people cannot honestly say that they're assertive all the time because it does take some practice and it directly relates to confidence. Now, let's say, for instance, um, I don't know, someone in the shop has given you the wrong change and it's only a small amount, let's say 50 pence, right? But maybe you need that 50 pence for a newspaper or something. Um, let's say it's a busy shop and you feel, oh, maybe I shouldn't bother them because it's a long queue or something. But being assertive would be, well, wait a second, they have made a mistake. It's my money and I'm entitled to it. So you politely say, excuse me, I think this change is wrong. And that's it. And I think that sort of thing takes practice because not everyone, like I say, is decent. Not everyone takes things very calmly and politely. And some people are just naturally rude. got an attitude problem. They just, for them, being decent to other human beings is not on their priority list. Um, and I think fundamentally what we have to remember is that if they speak to us in a certain way, if they're rude, ultimately it is their problem. And the chances are they will speak to everyone like that. And it's unfortunate that that exists, but ultimately if they're disrespectful to a stranger, the chances are they're disrespectful to all strangers. And they're probably a very bitter, possibly lonely individual. Um, so I think being assertive isn't necessarily about always getting into confrontation. It's about knowing how to handle difficult situations. And it does take time. But I think that's very different from being overly sensitive. And trying to differentiate between the two, I think, is very important. Um, there has been times in my life where I have been a bit too sensitive, and I've kind of snapped at people, or I've been a little bit paranoid and taking things personally. And the reason I'm saying this is not to, I think it's just helpful for the online community because there's people out there that can directly relate to that. But what I've learned as I've got a little older is that trying to reach that assertive level does take time, and it directly correlates with confidence. And I think if you reach that, it is a very, very useful tool in life. The fact of the matter is, in life, we simply don't always have the things exactly the way we want them. Things do go wrong, and occasionally we are treated unfairly, and there are some circumstances there's only so much we can do. But we have to remind ourselves very, very, very few people in this world have a completely smooth path. Even people that look privileged, it isn't actually a case that they're constantly in a smooth path. We cannot judge other people from an outside appearance. So someone may look rich, successful, happy, but we don't know what's going on in their personal life. Likewise, someone may look like they're poor or they are struggling in some way, but maybe that person is stronger than they seem. We simply cannot judge people on surface level, and we're all guilty of it. I'm guilty of it. We all do it. I think judging others is part of human nature. I mean, it's not a good thing, but it's something that I think we all subconsciously do. No one can kind of rise above that and say, "Oh, I never, ever, ever judge others." On some level, it might be a very small level, or it might be very high level. We all do it. I think it's an inevitable part of interacting with other human beings. And even in competition in life, we look at the Olympics. All Olympians judge each other because they have to. They have to measure up how well their opponent is doing. So there's a certain level of judgment among all human beings. Politicians do it because they obviously that's a competitive field. They're looking to get votes to have a mandate to govern. Um, Business people do it because there's business rivalries. Competition is a major part of human society. And even on a more basic level, all of us do it. So the question is about, and again, this comes into not caring what others think. Now, I've covered a lot of themes here, so I'm going to round this up. But I really, really think, ultimately, I'll conclude with this. Reaching assertiveness is important, standing up for ourselves. But that doesn't mean being oversensitive. And I think assertiveness ties directly in with confidence. Being oversensitive ties directly in with the lack of confidence. So they're actually in opposite tractions. But being assertive is a very powerful thing, and it's about being comfortable in ourselves, and yes, defending ourselves. Nothing wrong with that, but knowing that it isn't always necessary to be in a confrontation mode. Okay, thank you for watching. That's just my thoughts, just my opinions. You don't have to agree. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you.